The Earl Nelson Story. I, Earl Nelson, opened the door to a lonely hellion with a flat shoe ostentatiously beneath a long coat. Then the softling took a paper flower from a purse, Lola's pleasing, healthless ogle titillating me. Sassy smiles asked with many nonsensical words. I tempted the little huckster with money. Without hesitation, she followed off to my fantasy. Okay.
That sounds really good.
I
Well, what do you
I
think?
stumbled a little bit, but let's go to the next one.
All right. Hello, this is Richard Stashy from Take Her to Tales, and I done what some people have considered impossible. I have actually decoded two anagram short stories in Novikov's book Lolita. I've also have a strong suspicion on a third anagram story and probably several others, but the third one is definitely a little bit more complicated than these two. I figure it might take me about almost a year to solve if I was really trying my hardest at it. On the other hand, I also think that if I show how I done it, others are going to definitely be able to solve most of these quite faster than I could. To begin with, I just wanted to explain that Stanley Kubrick's movie Lolita had a lot of hinting towards the serial killer Earl Nelson. And upon looking at a lot of stuff about it, a lot of things kind of checked off, such as Charlotte is a landlady, and most of Earl Nelson's victims happen to be landladies. And then if you really watch that cutscene, there's some impossibilities going on here. Yes, they're sitting in a drive-through, but it doesn't make any sense why all three of them would be in the drive-through. So the cutscene kind of illustrates like the moment the landlady would show him his room, and when she's off her guard, he attacks and takes her out. Other scenes in the story, such as like the police convention that happens to be, which turns out if you actually read into the Earl Nelson story, is that when he got captured, he tried to take a train out of the city, and which happened to be filled of police officers. The ever shifting band aids in his hand is also another indicator that Earl Nelson had this oddity with his fingers itself. In some cases, they actually describe him as the Gorilla Man. Another thing is that, according to Novikov, when he was writing his book, he told people that his inspiration was based in a gorilla in a cage, a monkey in a cage. Well, believe it or not, Earl Nelson was called the Gorilla Man. So, and he was in prison. So it just it just seems like there's lot of indicators that it would be Earl Nelson. And upon reading the book, unfortunately, I could not find anything that really linked to Earl Nelson, but I did find a lot of stuff linking to H.H. Holmes. When I'm reading the book Lolita itself, my mind is already projecting that Humford is a deranged, sociopathic, psychopathic serial killer, and definitely all the words that he is mincing in there is not something that a lot of people were actually thinking of. More dark, more heavy, more he's more like he's murdering people. He murdered Charlotte. That's how I seen it. He did not have a wedding with her. This whole wedding thing was just a lie, a typical lie that he would do. And the comical aspect of the lie was when he was telling the story about this letter that Charlotte wrote to him, which was insanely long. He makes it out like he didn't really care about it. He didn't really remember much about it. But he made it extremely long, which would indicate that this was technically a lie. So I was talking to Gershom, and I do a lot of talking back and forth on my Twitter account as well as I have a Discord account. Anyway, as I was talking to him, I was trying to figure out this one passage in chapter 1, paragraph 2, and it goes by as she was low, playing low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. She was Dolores on the dotted line. But in my arms, she was always Lolita. And this passage kind of made me think of like the Sphinx tale or the Manhunter, when the Tooth Fairy serial killer was explained to a reporter how these people that he spied upon, how they were before and how they became afterward. And it kind of came off to me as that because once again, like I said, my mind is so connecting the dots that Humphrey Humper is a sociopath. Gershom, on the other hand, he didn't really think of it like that way, and he said that, well, maybe I should check it out as an anagram. I know that Novikov wrote many anagrams in the story, and I wasn't really thinking about it at the time, but then I was just like, okay, I'll play along. The entire passage, that one passage, I started decoding a little bit, and what I've done is, for giggles, and yes, I originally was not taking this thing that seriously at the time because I really didn't think it was going to go anywhere. But I did dug up the words Earl Nelson, Loa Cohen, the Gorilla Man, Winnipeg. And then I've dug up left under the bed. This is really interesting to me because when I came up with the word left under the bed, I just feel that I'm really onto something here. So then what I done is I end up taking paragraph 1 and paragraph 2 and then I started to really dig up all the key words that were related to Earl Nelson and Loa Cohen. And all these key words did not need to borrow letters from other words. Now, what do I have? A mess of keywords. This process took me about 3 months to decode. It's really hard to explain the time spent on this thing because this is kind of like during the partial of my recovery period, partially because I was watching the babies too. And it was like the best time for me to work on it, except for my wife. She thought I was focused on it way too much than I should have been. So, with this short list of keywords, I decided to do my first attempt in trying to decode this thing. And I was like, all right, everyone's talking heavily about AI. Well, maybe I could just drop these words and see if they could come up with a coherent story from this. No, 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 no. AI does not understand anagrams. AI is the worst thing ever that I've have zero luck with AI. And I want AI to be this super easy tool that everyone describes that it should be. And I'm not going to spend much time ranting about AI, but every time I used AI to help me out on this, it was like taking 10 steps backwards. And then every time it comes up with an idea what the message is or whatever it is. And then when I was cross-checking the letters, I was always extra letters or letters short or letters that's not supposed to be in this pile. And it just was very frustrating. But I'm going to tell you the truth. I did try to do AI. My wife thinks it's because I'm using like a free version of AI, but it's not really a free version. I'm using AI on Twitter. I'm using AI on Google. I'm using AI on some other apps that I came across, and each one is just as worse as the last one. Next part of the research I had to do is I had to go ahead and start really digging into the history, the story of Loa Cohen and Early Nelson. Therefore, you get a better idea of how to write this short story out. That's when Paper Flowers came across. Now, Paper Flowers was one of those keywords that I have on the list. These are also the keywords that I kind of like discovered later on during the research. And I just kind of kept on focusing on Paper Flowers. I'm going to focus on Earl Nelson. I'm going to focus on Lowell Cohen. And then originally I was focusing on the Gorilla Man as well as some of the other words. My theory on how Novikov writes his stuff, I think he just draws the inspiration from the event, puts a list of the key words for the event, and he limiting his writing to the key words to make a story of this event. And then he flips it around and does the anagram that we see today. Now, to me, I feel like this is a lot of work involved, but this is why I guess he's an artist. While trying to decode this anagram, the problems that I ran across is that most of these keywords are just red herrings, and it turns out that the only real keywords on this that's related to the Earl Nelson story is Earl Nelson, Loa, Paper Flowers. And a lot of the other stuff is all his fluff in the story. I went through this thing as a fine tooth comb in trying to letter checks because, like I said, AI was zero help. And one of the most problems some things I had with AI was that every time I asked it to, here's what I got so far, could you check to see what words, what letters I'm missing? And it'll give me a list. And then once again, even that list is wrong. Notoriously, there is only one B in this entire passage. In these two paragraphs, I know this by heart because there's only one B in this one B. And therefore it was very important because for the longest time while I was decoding this, I kept on thinking that the ending is under the bed, under the bed. I tried under the mat, but then under the mat doesn't seem to make sense to me because mat I just feel like is on the floor. Maybe he did put her under the mat. Maybe that's what they had. But I couldn't for the longest time while I was decoding this thing, I kept B for being under the bed. And then while decoding it, it just came across that no, it's not under the bed. And it also seems a little bit more direct than what Novikov would have wrote. He was more like when he writes something, he just basically wants your imagination to go with it. And I feel like yes, this entire passage is very dark, especially if you know the Earl Nelson story as well as what happened to Lola, and then you'll understand what he means by without hesitation she fouled off to my fantasy. But it works perfect. And that's the other thing I wanted to point out is that everything in this makes complete sense to the event of the Loa Cohen's murder, which makes me feel 99.9% right up there that this is the Anagram short story that's in the book. This is just one of them. And I know deep down that a lot of people are not going to like this because it does take the entire Lolita story into a whole different angle. It does put a named serial killer, Earl Nelson, into the book. The little bit of the hints, the suggestions of necrophilia that's been going on in the book, I think will be a little bit more drawn out now. People will actually really notice it, which will be great. On the other hand, I just wanted to get it out, and not to mention Gershom is, is getting really frustrated because he knows I keep talking about this and he just wants me to get this video out too. After my first attempt in cracking the Earl Nelson story, I just kind of consider like, okay, I done something that was amazing. I don't need to do anything else. In about a week's time, my mind was going like, well, what about the other two paragraphs? Would they have something in there? And I was just digging around, and I decided to go back to Earl Nelson and see if I could find another victim of Earl Nelson in that passage, and I just couldn't find anything that would seem connecting, not with the keywords. So then I was thinking like, well, maybe it's H. Holmes. Now, to begin with, as I mentioned before, when I was watching Stanley Kubrick's movie, I kind of saw some of the signs that seemed to connect towards Earl Nelson. But when I was reading the book, I saw every sign saying H. Holmes. And it's not that I'm a huge fan of H. Holmes. Originally, I wanted to write a book based on H. Holmes, so I did spend some time really researching the character. And I just know that his story would be very, very huge. Some of the key words that I found in paragraphs 3 and 4 are Herman Webster Muggett, torture doctor, Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, and once again, I would have very few words left still hanging. And again, I pretty much know that I do have a story. The interesting thing, there's no Z, which was a godsend because originally I thought the forward would be an H. Holmes story because there's a lot of stuff he's done. But in this case, it looks like that the focus, according to the keywords, would be Julia and Pearl Connor. Now, the story about Julia and Pearl Connor is that Julia was with H.H. Holmes, and apparently he got her pregnant. And according to some of the rumors, is that she tried to blackmail him with the pregnancy, and he kind of forced an abortion on her and killing her, and then eventually killing her daughter. Pearl Connor happens to be 4 or 5 years old at the time. H.H. Holmes is a pure sociopath. Definitely consider him at the same level as Hannibal Lecter. Pearl Connor's death actually makes more sense to the story Lolita than anything else because of her age. Yes, I do believe that age is a factor because of the third possible story would also have 5 children, and the oldest one is 14 years old. I have always connected Errol Nelson's victim Lola to Lolita because of the similarities of Lola and Lolita. That Lola happened to be one of the few victims that was quite young. Interesting about Pearl, though, according to the rumors, Julia and Pearl Connor were murdered on Christmas Eve. And it's very interesting that according to the foreword, Dolores died while giving birth on Christmas Day. Just something else to think about. Well, it looks like that the babies are starting to get up, so I'm going to close this video with my wife reading the second anagram story. And naturally, if you like this video, please talk about it in the comments. If you don't like this video, please talk about it in the comments. Anyway, this is Richard Stassi from Take It or Tales, and hopefully it won't be too long for the next video.
The H.H. Holmes story. I, Herman W. Mudgett, had an obligation to be tabled and examined for my indulgence. Julia's fiery hue of livid eyes soothing my woe. Her asinine performance, cacophonous ballad of a hen cry, has pleased me. Pearl's alibi was monotonously silent. Let me try that again. Pearl's alibi was monotonously silent, unnerved by an event in a death pit. The anathema brat was intensely heaving tears. She missed a droplet on her chin, a shrewd slip betraying the runt. I adored a smirk of astute effort, so I smothered a motherless child with chloroform. Okay.
It's like a tongue twister.
It is a little bit, and it's like I said, it's not very eloquent. So.
Well, my question is, does it look like that I have too many commas here, or should I have a period somewhere?
This could probably be broken up into different sentences and stuff, but I think you've shown that this clearly can be anagrammed out into words and sentences that play into the history of these two real life criminals, murderers. So I think that's what you're trying to go for. You're not trying to go for perfection. You're just showing within these paragraphs from the book, you can move the words around and you can spell out the full names of notorious murderers